Story 1. One thick night fog enveloped the vast expanse of the forest, embracing the trees like ghosts hungry for secrets. Paul, a young, adventurous soul, had ventured alone into this dense and endless forest, drawn by the tales of mysteries that had surrounded him since childhood. As he ventured deeper into the darkness, the beam of his flashlight flickered, casting moving shadows on the intertwined trees. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind through the branches and the stealthy rustle of unseen creatures in the bushes. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the night, sending shivers down Paul's spine. His heart pounded as he tried to locate the source of the terrifying sound, but the forest seemed to close in around him, disorienting his senses. As he continued his exploration, Paul realized that the trees seemed to change shape, silently moving in the darkness as if they had a life of their own. Indistinct whispers seemed to float in the air, evoking unsettling warnings that sent shivers down Paul's spine. Lost in a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, Paul felt a sinister presence lurking in the darkness, its eyes scanning his progress with unhealthy eagerness. Every step he took seemed to bring him closer to the dark heart of the forest, where ancient evil resided since time immemorial. Hours seemed to pass like centuries as Paul struggled to find a way out of this living nightmare. But the further he went, the tighter the forest seemed to grip him, trapping him in its dark depths like an insect in a spider's web. Suddenly, a clearing appeared before him, bathed in a strange and supernatural glow. Intrigued but wary, Paul approached slowly, sensing an ancient and impenetrable power emanating from the depths of the clearing. As he stepped into the clearing, Paul felt the ground give way beneath his feet, plunging him into a whirlwind of darkness. Unfathomable voices whispered in his mind, telling him long-forgotten secrets and warning of unfathomable dangers. When Paul opened his eyes, he found himself in a strange and nightmarish world where the trees seemed twisted and deformed, and strange creatures roamed in the darkness. He realized then that he had entered a forgotten realm, where time itself was a distant echo of the past. Determined to find a way to escape, Paul embarked on a perilous journey through this strange realm, facing unspeakable trials and dangers at every turn. Furious storms swept across the devastated landscape, while malevolent creatures lurked in the shadows, waiting for their prey with demonic patience. But despite all the obstacles in his path, Paul refused to give up hope of finding the light of day again. He drew on his inner strength and unwavering determination, carving a path through the darkness with fierce resolve. Finally, after an eternity of struggle and sacrifice, Paul caught a glimpse of hope on the horizon. A mystical door opened before him, revealing a passage to the outside world and the long-awaited freedom. With a final breath of determination, Paul crossed the threshold of the door, leaving behind the realm of darkness to rediscover the light of day. As he emerged from the endless forest, he felt a sense of relief and gratitude wash over him, grateful to have survived the unspeakable horror of this grueling journey. But even safely in the outside world, Paul knew that the memories of his terrible ordeal would remain etched in his mind forever, haunting him whenever he found himself plunged into the darkness of the night. Story 2. In the heart of a dark forest, where trees stood like silent sentinels and darkness seemed to devour any trace of light, dwelled an ancient and insidious evil. This forest was known for its tales of mysterious disappearances and supernatural events that seemed to defy any rational explanation. A group of friends, eager for adventure and thrills, decided to challenge the dark legends of the forest by venturing into it on a summer night. Among them were Emily, a brave yet cautious young woman, and Jake, a fearless explorer who feared not the unknown. Upon their arrival, an oppressive atmosphere descended upon the group, as if the trees themselves whispered silent warnings. But they ventured deeper into the forest nonetheless, guided by curiosity and the desire to explore the unexplored. As they moved through the darkness, strange noises began to resonate around them. Indistinct murmurs seemed to float in the air, while moving shadows danced among the trees like fleeting specters. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the night, sending shivers down Emily and Jake's spines. Their hearts raced as they tried to locate the source of the terrifying sound, but the forest seemed to warp space, confusing their senses and leading them astray. The further they advanced, the more the forest seemed to come alive around them, its gnarled branches hissing in the wind like hungry serpents. Menacing shadows seemed to slink between the trees, their eyes gleaming with a malevolent light that sent shivers down Emily and Jake's spines. Lost in a labyrinth of darkness and unspeakable terrors, Emily and Jake struggled to keep their calm and composure. But as they desperately tried to find their way back, they realized that the forest had other plans for them, sinister and insidious plans. In the distance, a strange glow appeared in the darkness, drawing Emily and Jake like a beacon in the storm. Intrigued yet wary, they approached slowly, sensing an ancient and unknown power emanating from the depths of the forest. As they entered the clearing, a sense of unease washed over Emily and Jake, as if something was watching them in the darkness. Unfathomable whispers seemed to float in the air, evoking unsettling warnings that made Emily and Jake tremble with horror. Suddenly, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes burning with a malevolent glow that pierced the darkness. It was the spirit of the forest, an ancient and elusive entity that had resided in these woods for centuries. Terrified yet fascinated, Emily and Jake engaged in conversation with the spirit of the forest, seeking to uncover the mysteries surrounding this cursed place. For hours, they talked in the darkness, exchanging stories of life and death, sin and redemption. Eventually, the spirit seemed to find peace, and with a final sigh, it dissipated into the air, leaving behind an aura of calm and tranquility. Emily and Jake remained there, alone in the darkness, pondering the events of the night and the unresolved mysteries of the dark forest. At dawn, they emerged from the forest, exhausted but unharmed, grateful to have survived the horror of the night. But even safe in the outside world, they knew that the memories of their terrible ordeal would remain etched in their minds forever, haunting them whenever they found themselves plunged into the darkness of the night. Story 3. Of course, here is a horror story about a hiking trip that takes a nightmarish turn. A group of friends consisting of Sarah, Tom, Lisa, and Matt decided to go hiking in the remote mountains for a weekend of adventure in the great outdoors. They were all excited to get away from the city and enjoy the fresh mountain air. They began their hike under a clear and sunny sky, walking on winding trails lined with majestic pine trees. The atmosphere was joyful and relaxed as they exchanged stories and laughter along the way. However, as they progressed further into the woods, a thick fog began to envelop the trees, obscuring their view and their sense of direction. They continued to move forward, hoping that the fog would soon dissipate. But as they continued, the fog seemed to thicken, enveloping them in an opaque veil that made it difficult to see more than a few meters in front of them. Tension began to build among the group as they realized they were lost. They tried to follow the markers on the trees, but they seemed to elude their sight, leading them in random directions and further away from their initial path. Panic began to set in as they realized they were truly lost in the middle of nowhere. As they wandered through the fog, they suddenly heard strange noises coming from the surrounding woods. Indistinct whispers seemed to float in the air, accompanied by the cracking of branches and muffled footsteps. The tension escalated further when Matt suddenly disappeared from the group without a trace. They called out his name, but there was no response, only the oppressive silence of the forest. Desperate, they continued their search for Matt, but every step seemed to take them further away from him. The fog seemed to close in on them, isolating them in a world of darkness and despair. Suddenly, Lisa stumbled upon something soft and slimy on the ground. Shining the flashlight down, she discovered with horror a pile of blood-stained clothing with signs of struggle all around. It was Matt's clothes. Terror gripped them as they realized that something sinister was lurking in the woods with them. They began to run, ignoring the direction they were heading, only eager to get away from this living nightmare. But as night fell and the fog thickened even more, they realized they were trapped in a maze of endless darkness. Menacing shadows seemed to pursue them, their whispers growing louder with each step. Suddenly, they found themselves facing a clearing in the middle of the forest, illuminated by a faint but sinister glow. At the center of the clearing stood a dark silhouette, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. It was Matt, but not as they had known him. His face was contorted with an expression of madness and despair, and his gaze was empty and lifeless. He seemed to be possessed by a dark and unholy force that defied understanding. Terrified, they recoiled, but it was too late. Matt's silhouette lunged at them, his clawed hands outstretched like hungry talons. They screamed in terror as they were dragged into the darkness, swept away by an evil force that knew neither mercy nor forgiveness. And so, in the depths of the dark forest, their nightmare came to an end, but their story became a dark and sinister legend, warning all who dared to venture into the woods to stay away from the darkness that dwelled within.